Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Silicon Valley After Show. Today we're talking Season 4, Episode 2. I thought it was so good, as did the panel, that all of us got hards on, so don't move a muscle.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Oh! The soundtrack to Silicon Valley is consistently one of the best things about this show.
Oh, yeah.
I never would have thought that pairing just aggressive hip-hop with such a tech nerdy culture would work as well as it does, but it's one of my favorite things about this show.
Well, remember Office Space?
That's true. It's very Mike Judge.
Damn good to be a gangster.
It's very Mike Judge. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Silicon Valley After Show here on AfterBuzz TV. My name is Jeff Graham. Today we're talking Season 4, Episode 2, and we had a full panel. We did it, as promised. To my left, immediately, good friend of mine, but we've never hosted together. So.
No, I've never been on the panel with any of you, and Nate I only met a few minutes ago, but it's been a lifelong dream. I'm so nervous about it, I threw up in my pants.
There it
But
is.
I'm Christian Bladt. I'm on Twitter at ChristianDMZ.
Nathan, where can the people find you on Twitter and on the internet?
You can find me at DogLikeNate on Instagram and Twitter. This is my first AfterBuzz After Show. I'm super excited.
I love it, breaking that
yeah.
AfterBuzz cherry. It's awesome. And I won't
Especially
ever say that again.
Fantastic show too.
Absolutely. Philip.
And you guys remember me from last episode, Phil Svitek here, excited to talk about it.
Absolutely. I thought this was, first of all, overall reactions to this episode. I'm curious to hear what each of y'all think. Let's start with you, Phil, in the end.
I loved it. You know, I was curious to see how far Dinesh could go, and the fact that he lasted one episode, as Guilfoyle had predicted, is just simply brilliant, and I'm all for it. There was a couple of things I was confused about, which I think you guys were equally confused about, which we'll talk about, so I'm excited to sort of dive into those.
Yes. Nathan, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, same thing. I was really unsure how far this Dinesh CEO thing was going to go, if this was really going to be like a season-wide plot point, but I think I was pleasantly surprised with how it was resolved.
I was also impressed that Dinesh got 11 days, as they said, in the course of the episode. But, of course, my favorite part is always the dynamic between Dinesh and Guilfoyle.
Yes.
And the way that he popped the champagne and, you know, just his smile gets bigger and bigger as they go along and as he gets more worried. And the whole exchange about, you know, whether or not he should put more product in his hair. Yeah, all
fantastic.
of that. So, yeah, I mean, I could live in just the two of them sitting at their computers and just bickering back and forth for half an hour. If they ever wanted to do that, I'm in.
Yeah, it's great. I agree. I thought this was a great episode. I kind of wish we might have gotten to see Dinesh's reign last a little longer than one episode, but it's also very Silicon Valley to introduce something and just quickly dethrone it. I feel like I was reading online and some coverage that this show likes to hit the reset button a lot, which when a show is as well written as it is, like Silicon Valley, doesn't really matter to me. That being said, I think this was one of my favorite performances we've seen from Kumail Nanjiani. I thought this was hilarious, and yeah, the hair gel was just epic.
Yeah.
But before we talk about Pied Piper and Erlich's incubator and all of that, I think I want to talk about Hooli. Because, of course, we see Gavin, Jack, and Gavin's minions. I think Hoover is the name of the security guard. And, of course, Denpak, who we've seen before. At the top of the show, I was saying I was interested in the way that Denpak kind of inserted himself into kind of the behind-the-scenes action at Hooli. And I was confused as to why he kind of was trying to insert himself in that situation. Christian, what were you thinking about that?
Well, I think that, you know, very clearly at one point, Gavin says that Hoover, and we all think his name's Hoover, but if we're wrong, someone let us know. But he says, you're the only one I can trust around here. And, you know, Denpak is like off in the little snack area and he hears it. So he's like, wait, that's supposed to be my job. I'm supposed to be the one that he trusts the most. So that's why he immediately starts badly engineering some kind of, you know, some kind of espionage within the company. And he was clearly terrible at it, but that made for good comedy.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So it was kind of like Hoover versus Denpak trying to win Gavin's affection.
And Hoover kind of the whole time seems to suspect, like...
Oh, he knew.
Yeah, he
totally
Yeah,
knew.
he's like, really? You heard this?
He said, she said.
Yeah. That's true. That was very funny.
It was funny because like Denpak clearly knows so little about tech. So for him to keep mentioning different communication platforms and keep going was great writing, I thought. Were you guys surprised? This whole Gavin thing, of course, did you guys think Gavin was going to acquire Piper Chat? And did you think he was going to acquire Piper Chat in the way that he did?
No.
Because they did a great job of setting up the other way, right? They led you into a certain expectation as with the characters, and so the way it unfolded, you know, is completely different.
They ran it down too of all of the list of things that like you thought could happen and what would be good for them to have, what would be bad. And so then to come out of left field with this, it was.
And as much as we know this character over the last 3 seasons, the idea that he would buy this just so that he could check Jack's chat history, it made perfect sense. So you're like, okay, great. So there's obviously no reason that he wouldn't just offer him how much money
it's
you
not,
want.
It's not out of character.
Yeah, completely.
There's actually a motivation for it. But then, even then, just Gavin's has like he's this character. He has so much power. He does all these things, these displays of what he can do and stuff. But he's still fallen short so much, right? And so finally, in his eyes, he's about to get a win. It doesn't matter what it's not a negotiation. This is what's going to happen, and he just has no idea, and it's just so good.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up the motivation for the acquisition, because like so consistently, not only with Gavin, but all these big swingers in Silicon Valley, their motivation for purchasing apps or acquisitions is always just so unfounded, which is just so consistent with I think all of Mike Judge's shows. If you look at all the corporate satire and all of his stuff, the reason for a lot of business maneuvers on the show are just so laughable and hilarious to me. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Christian.
I do like also Jack Barker in this role as an employee. Like we saw him in the CEO role very much last season, and he sort of had to placate to the board and everyone else. But I like the idea that he actually is somewhat of a fantastic employee.
Yeah,
even
he's
after everything
he's like, I know what you're doing. You're doing what Bob Iger does. You wanted me to get down there. I get it. I figured out a way to make you billions of dollars. Thanks for putting me down there, Gavin.
But
I know, I'm with you.
But what about the plane thing?
Right.
Oh, he's still pissed.
No,
but it doesn't mean he doesn't want to make a few $billion dollars.
But Barker, I
don't think he gets it.
You really think he was innocently thinking that, it's quicker if we drop me off first?
My impression of him has always been that he's kind of an idiot who's just happened to pick the right people around him. But you're right. He could very well know.
That's why I'm unsure. That's why I'm kind of curious if this. I mean, obviously he was making up him, but there's something going on with what he's thinking is his plan by being sent down there.
Here's why I'm with you, Nate. The last thing he said as he left the room was like, "Oh, and the wig looks great," or something like that.
That's true. That was actually very funny.
So I feel like that dig made me think like, "Oh, he's playing a game here too."
Right?
I don't know. What do you guys? Let us know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think Jack Barker is naively believing that he's experiencing different levels of the corporation?
He could be conning us.
Or is he conning us and Gavin? Do you guys think Gavin Belson has wig-like hair? Since it was brought up on the show.
No, not at all.
I think he has a great head of hair.
If he does, it's a fantastic wig.
That's true, especially coming from the fact that Jack Barker is fairly bald.
Yes.
So. I feel like that mostly covers it with Hooli. I feel like we've been getting just little pieces of Hooli so far in episodes 1 and 2. Is there anything else you guys wanted to discuss regarding Jack, Gavin, Hoover, or Denpak?
I mean, the big story point with Hooli ties into something else that happens. So.
Oh yes.
So.
And that's something else that happened was, of course, we'll start with Dinesh. Dinesh has been leading Piper Chat as the new CEO. Of course, Richard left to pursue his own venture in the same incubator, but we got to see Dinesh in the role of CEO. First of all, let's talk about. We mentioned it at the top a bit, but what did you guys think of Dinesh acting as the new CEO for Piper Chat?
I mean, that's what he did. He just acted.
Yeah.
He wasn't actually a CEO in any sense of the word. He just went on. I mean, this 11 days was essentially 11 days worth of a press tour. And that was it.
It was bad press, too.
Yeah, and you could tell that he was going to be taken down at some point because he was so cocky about it. And, Richard was right. He was definitely being a dick to him.
It was the hair gel.
Yeah, and you're just like, at some point, you're just like, this isn't going to go well. And you're like, oh, it's actually in this episode 5 minutes later. So
Literally the same episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised that Dinesh, verbally agreed to share files with Richard, but then because there was nothing in writing.
Yeah, I was surprised by that move,
it's a dick move.
But then later when he has a line where he says, Richard responds to him like, we're just some guys in a house, and he goes, well, I don't want to be guys in a house. So when he says that, then I'm like, okay, maybe this is coming from a place where he genuinely thinks that he's gonna push the company towards something new and be successful, and so that's why he's being kind of cutthroat. But I don't know, this would seem kind of a dick move.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, if it's going back to Gavin, I mean, that's all Gavin's really displayed. So everyone who's won in Silicon Valley has those traits.
He's being cutthroat.
And so his arguments early on were somewhat sound, but just arrogance got the best of him.
It certainly did. We got to see some of the press. We saw him on Bloomberg. I thought this was very funny. But just like anything in Silicon Valley, when there's a high, there's an immediate low. And we find out that Dinesh did not properly respond to the terms and conditions requirements of, is it COPPA? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, I didn't write down what it stood for, but it was COPPA, yeah.
Right. Which means that many less than 13-year-old girls have been using this app, which is very problematic for the reasons that you might expect.
To the tune of $21 billion, because it was $16,000, and of course Dinesh still being cocky.
His,
like,
yes,
it's like, oh, let's just get, okay, great. Do they take cash?
I mean, we have to talk about, if we're talking about that scene, we have to talk about the lawyer.
Yes.
And
I do love that guy.
I love that guy. Let alone that they brought him back. He's in the car wash. Hey guys, I just finished detailing the Kia. Oh,
Monahan.
So
It was
good.
so great to have him back.
And he's trying, even being the lawyer he is, being all professional, and Dinesh, like you said, so cocky, not even like contemplating the severity of the situation.
Absolutely, and it was fun to have Jared there. In general, quick tangent, and we'll get to it more, but this was a great Jared episode.
Oh yeah.
He's been on a roll, I think, ever since, I feel like season 3 was really his breakout season, where they really started to kind of figure out who he was and who he wasn't.
Right.
And I feel like just since then, consistently, he's been really the show's breakout character.
I think he's just defined by all the things that he doesn't and won't allow himself to do.
Yes.
Christian will understand this, but Jared needed a Goodfellas moment.
He did.
You know what I mean? Of like,
Just like, yeah,
just
thank
shut
you.
up.
Yeah.
Just shut up and go with it, and we'll get out of this, as opposed to, actually. And you can even see in Dinesh's face of like, shut up. What
Yeah.
else?
And Phil, we work together closely, and that's another thing that I think Jared and I have in common is just like so playing by the rules. Like I'm such a rule follower, like Jared is. But of course, the reason
We follow the rules here, by the way.
we do all follow the rules, but I think sometimes maybe too.
It's an organization filled with Jareds.
Yeah.
There are no Richards and no Dinesh's anywhere. Although there might be a Guilfoyle.
But back to Dinesh. So we find out that, of course, this could be a $22 billion mistake. And the reason I love the way this was written and played out is because we see them in the incubator discussing the implications of more users. And as we're discussing these implications, we see literally the graph of users just being added.
You hear the
And that-
noise of the.
And while this happens, I'm glad Christian mentioned it, but of course Guilfoyle pops a champagne to Dinesh's short-lived.
His face, the entire episode, his face is just gold. If you just watch him, his reactions to Dinesh.
I don't think Guilfoyle's ever been happier, not just on the show, like in the character's entire
course.
life. I think it was all building to this moment. And
I mean,
yeah,
could you hope for a bigger crash and burn than something like
It was
this?
great. And we got to see a real moment of low from Dinesh, and actually a really kind of sweet, sincere moment between him and Richard. We go into the bathroom, we see Dinesh in the bathtub sulking, and Richard kind of gives him really heartfelt advice as a CEO. What did you guys think of this scene overall?
I think you're right. It's actually, nicely a heartfelt moment. And, when it's such a funny show, it's not like it's jarring. You're just like, oh, look, they actually are able to have these kind of moments too. Mm-hmm. And I think the advice that Jared gives him, it's like, which bad decision, that Richard gives him, which bad decision can you live with? And you're like, that's actually really wise from a guy who also wasn't a particularly good CEO either, Right. So, I don't know. I thought it was very nice. And it's like, even though they clearly had their differences in the episode, they are still all actually, still really good friends.
Christian, as the host of many political shows at AfterBuzz, I think the advice of make the least worst bad decision possible is very apt.
I think that's how a lot of people voted. They made the least worst decision possible.
Yeah, I thought this was a nice moment. I like how Silicon Valley does this sometimes. I think for the most part it's a very farcical, satirical show, but I think once an episode we get some sweet moments between the guys.
But even so, like, I mean, they're bonding over the fact of one guy puked in his pants. You know what I mean? So on a surface level, it's still ridiculous.
It's true.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, of course, an important moment. Even though Dinesh is in a shithole regarding what to do with Piper Chat, he does get a meeting with Gavin Belson. And this meeting's a short one. Gavin is, of course, furious, and his ego is punched, which is really, this is a show about ego when it comes down to it. And because his ego is punched, he kind of forces Dinesh into giving the company over.
Well, I mean, we don't even know he could probably care less about the Hooli chat.
Right.
Maybe it's just because he really wants to get the files for
The chat records.
the records, right?
Of course.
So I mean, yeah, I know he wants to get them anyways, but I think that was really the motivation why he was so aggressive about it.
It was great. And of course, the consequences of that acquisition become very clear at the last scene of the episode, which I thought was brilliant. It's another focus.
Well, I love Dinesh's arrogance into it ends up being the thing that saves them all.
Yeah.
Of like, we took Hooli chat and made it better.
Yeah. And I also liked how he just realizes right away, like, oh my God, this is the way out. And Gavin's like, I'm going to count. You have 5 seconds. He's like, 5, 4. Okay, I'll do it.
I'm in.
Yeah. He's like, no problem. And, but yeah, it's true. It's just talking about how great the product was. Just being a dick has really worked out for him in the end, or at least so it seems until you see the preview for next week's episode.
Yes.
But,
this show does a great job with turns like that, I think. I think you know that the guys are going to get out of it, but how they get out of it is never the thing that you can predict, which just shows, I think, how smart the show can be and how it's surprising.
To get back to the focus group for a second, though, I loved when the person running it is saying all the names and it's all these girls' names, and it's like, and Carl said that he was nervous during the sign-in. Was anyone else nervous during the sign-in? Yeah. I know.
The timing, the comedic timing on this show is
it's so well written, and
course.
even that character, that actor that they got to run the focus group is just the timing was perfect. I agree.
The way he delivers it with his voice is just so.
And finally, the metaphor of the Pod Piper comes true. As Jared is quick to point out.
In the story, of course, they're leading little children into a dark place, and I guess that's what we're doing now, isn't it? I loved, Phil, as an editor, you have to love that final cut. They smashed to black so quickly in that last choice, and I love whenever the credits come in, there's just such a powerful effect. I just think this is a really well edited show, which people don't always give credit to, like editing. You mentioned even production design and direction are always, and it's HBO, so like it's premium.
It's all
stuff,
there, but yeah, I mean, even in like just going back to the timing. The editing is all a part of that because you got the great performances from the actors, you got fantastic timing, but then you've also got the editing, which lends itself to that. But yeah, even we were talking about the set design earlier and how you look at the house and like it looks like a house that a bunch of software designers live at with a bunch of nerdy stuff on the walls.
There's so much attention to the detail, like you were just saying, the stuff on the walls. And when we were talking before the show, I mean, the set for the Hooli headquarters, I mean, I have no idea what they would have spent on that, but it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Google campus.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one stone we haven't turned yet is, of course, the return of Jin Yang.
I was very excited to see Jin Yang back, and I loved this little, very minor storyline. But
God damn it, Big Head! Octopus, not Oculus.
I mean, you when your source is Big Head, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, another great Big Head episode. I think this episode really mined each character for the full value of their comedy, which I really thought was great. Always fun to have Jin Yang back. The thing I love is that we can kind of really just repeat the exact same story with Jin Yang every episode, and it never really gets old. Of just like how long can he bum around in this house, and what methods can he use?
Well, one more year apparently.
One more year.
Thanks to Big Head's bad information. Yeah. But and I of course have the expectation, by the way, that the octopus recipe
is going to take off.
It's good.
I think 10%. So too, because the guy said he was really excited. So I'm thinking that there actually is something there, which of course is going to be the most ridiculous thing
it'll
ever.
Be like the final episode of the season. All of a sudden, that's he's
going to buy them out.
Erlich goes broke, and then all of a sudden that 10% keeps everything afloat. Yeah.
Brings in a bunch of Chinese investors or something.
That's why you love Erlich, because he is that opportunist. That no matter now in theory he had 3 plays going. Now we're down to 2 with the octopus and whatever.
He's always so positive.
Yes.
Somewhat.
Yeah. I thought this was hilarious. I think it's funny because in the room, octopus, Oculus might not sound hilarious, but the way it was written and performed was just such a great payoff, and it was just so silly. I loved it. Okay, cool. I mean, the only other thing is we talked a bit about it, but of course, it's so much fun to watch Jared just torn between 2 leaders, his business allegiances versus his personal allegiances. What did you guys think of Jared's kind of character development in this episode?
Well, we all mentioned it individually, but there's a great line that he says to Richard, which is like, we can't talk about business, but we can talk about sports teams and their scores or pussy. And then later on, he mentions the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, trying to keep that as like what they talk about. And it's the word pussy coming out of Jared's mouth was so awkward that I definitely laughed the hardest at that moment in the whole half hour.
Yeah, and when he meets with Richard, when Richard brings the problem to him, and he goes, "Richard, you were inside of us?"
Without consent.
Well, that's what he says later to Dinesh. He goes, "Richard entered us without consent." Just the way that he delivers it so straightforward. Like there's no possible implication that could be there at all. He's just taking the words completely at face value.
Yeah, from a comedy writing perspective, the things that Jared says to the funny things that Jared says is like so high. The ratio of lines to like jokes is so high with Jared's character, I think especially.
Well, because I mean, it's proven to work. Like Tobias from Arrested Development had that same sort of setup of just he's unaware of what the hell he's actually saying.
That's a really interesting comparison. There are kind of shades of Tobias.
But I like that he has gotten somewhat more developed than he was in the past. Same thing with Bighead. For a long time, I was worried that Bighead was like not going to be on the show anymore. And I'm glad that he's gotten a little bit more development with his ownership of the company and such. But Jared especially, like with him showing his backbone to Richard too, even like putting his foot down, like, no, he's my boss now. This is, this Jared's always been about the rules, like you said. And he's, even with Richard, who we know how he feels about Richard, putting his foot down. It's nice to see that change.
It's a very smart way for them to just even create more conflict of Jared's allegiances to the rules and to his friendship. So it's hilarious. Anything else we haven't talked about in this episode? I feel like we've covered it pretty thoroughly. Any lines? I know we've already called out a lot of lines, but any that we haven't mentioned that you guys want to shout out for the writers?
And I always forget the name of the lawyer, but he says, "My shame will linger even after my voting rights are restored."
He has I also noticed too in that scene, after he talks to them about all that stuff, when he's putting the laptop away, he like wipes it off of his fingerprints completely and then passes it to Jared. Like I can't do this right now where I am.
Yeah, that was a nice touch actually. I did like that. Yeah.
I also just liked when Jared was talking about personal liability versus corporate liability when he goes, well, trust really has nothing to do with it. And thanks for making that official.
That's right. He just wants everybody
He gets so
to
excited.
This is a storyline that South Park actually played with, but when Dinesh just says, like, nobody reads the term of service, Jared just going, well, first off, everybody does the terms of service.
It's completely naive.
And secondly, it's that would have saved us from this legal.
Cool. Well, I guess with that, we might as well get into some predicciones.
And now, your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
Okay, so Christian, I think
I'm so scared right now. I've never been on a show where
pretty
they've done
terrifying.
that. So
oh yeah, you've done a lot of political
yeah.
coverage, but
I know. Well, we could have done some
could've
great
used that a lot.
predictions in November.
none of them
But
would have came true.
No, that's true.
Who could predict anything in this?
I don't know if you
political
want to be at fault for that. You might get some fingers pointed at you.
So Christian, I think was it you who mentioned that this octopus venture?
yeah, I think it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Or as our president would say, huge.
Huge.
So you say just to keep it consistent. But no, I think that's it's a minor story point in this episode. We're probably not going to hear about it for a while. I just expect that that's going to be something really big.
Any predictions from you guys?
I mean, I agree with the octopus thing, but I'm also just really curious to see. Obviously, Gavin is not going to be happy, as we saw. He is currently not happy, phically, violently happy. And with the teaser of Jared talking about him
Throwing
a sloth down the stairs, so he's like, they don't have people killed in the valley. Gavin's pretty scary, especially with. What is his friend's name? We decided
Hoover.
the security guard Hoover.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see what he puts Hoover on to get some revenge on them.
And clearly, I mean, Hoover will do anything for him. I mean, he took the same flight 15 times just to get it down to the minute or whatever.
I think it was like
last
15
episode.
times both ways.
Yeah, I think you're right actually. So.
Yeah, because he had to reset himself.
Yeah.
You have to do it like different days too
Yeah.
for different like temperatures and weather conditions to get an average.
Any predictions from you, Phil?
I'm excited to kind of see where it's going. I do think I like the reset in the sense that obviously now with them not having Piper Chat, they got to do something, and so why not help out Richard?
Yeah.
And talk about like, well, you got to pick the decision that you can sort of live with. Well, Dinesh and Richard suck at CEOs, but it seems like Richard sucks a little less.
Yeah.
I don't know. My vote's still for Bighead. He was almost CEO, and really, if you think about it, his dad would be the CEO. So maybe
His dad
we'll go
probably
up.
would make the best CEO out of all of them.
But as he said, not my idea.
I would love to actually see Bighead take the role of CEO. I think that'd be really, really funny. And like inept CEOs are like a common motif on this show, so it'd be funny to see his take on like the CEO.
See, it'd be great if Bighead was CEO and he was amazing at it.
Yeah.
Like, just somehow that level of responsibility is actually what he had needed all along.
Accidentally does all of
arbitrarily. Yeah, that's really funny.
I question your guys' judgments when he's like, he asked me if I wanted if he could pitch me something. I said yes. Do you think what he was? Then he started talking.
Yeah, they just went right back to their game of Go Fish that they were playing on their iPads.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sort of question his attentiveness.
Something about Oculus.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to see Lori Breen this season. Less so of a prediction, but more just what I want to see. I enjoy Monica. I think she's a nice straight.
Yeah, I like it too.
And I would love to see more Lori. I think like pretty consistently she's one of my favorite performances on the show. So yeah, that's something I'd like to see. But in terms of predictions, what's interesting about Silicon Valley is on one level, a lot happens each episode, so it can be hard to anticipate. Then another level, like not a lot happens in this show because they're in the same exact place.
It makes you feel like there's a lot happening, but it's so much like things happening and then just like
getting taken away.
Like it just never happened.
Exactly.
I mean, remember, it's like Entourage, but for Silicon Valley, in the sense that with that show, it was always like, oh, Vince got a movie. Oh, Vince doesn't have a movie.
Vince got the movie. The movie was bad.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, well, guys, I think this was a pretty thorough analysis of season 4, episode 2 of Silicon Valley. In the meantime, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Again, this is AfterBuzz TV. If you're watching, go ahead and give us a thumbs up and a comment. We love when you guys engage with us in the comments. We got
Smash
a couple
that
comments
like button.
last week. And if you're listening, go ahead and hop on iTunes. Give us 5 stars. Let us know what you think of the show. In the meantime, guys, my name is Jeff Graham. You guys can find me on Twitter at Jeffrey C. Graham. If you like comedy, I host a show where we table read scripts that have been produced with the writers in the room and reading in comedy this Friday at 10 a.m. on our sister network, Popcorn Talk. So tune in there. Christian.
I'm Christian Bladt at Christian DMZ. I do a lot of things over here, and you can find them if you follow me at Christian DMZ.
Again, I'm Nate Miller. You can find me at DogLikeNate, and I'm not on any other shows yet, but I will be very soon, so keep your eyes open.
Check out, I host a show called Anatomy of Movie on Popcorn Talk, as well as this show. This is the show that you guys care about, so definitely keep tuning back into this show. And I doubt you guys will like Rain, but I host a show called Rain.
In the meantime, guys, that's been the Silicon Valley After Show. We'll see you next week, Monday at 4 p.m.
I do host South Park, so you guys
And
probably
South-
like that. Bye.
Bye, guys.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
See you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.